Grace Ashmore stood by the window alone. Rain streaked down the cold hospital glass. She pressed her palm against its surface. "Another night shift," she whispered to herself. Her blue nurse's uniform felt heavier today. The terminal ward smelled of antiseptic sadness. She walked toward room 407 with tired steps. Inside, an elderly man lay perfectly still. His silver hair caught the lamplight beautifully. A priest stood reading prayers from scripture. Grace noticed the man's elegant dark suit. White flowers pinned to his lapel looked fresh. He came dressed for his own ending, she thought. The priest finished and left them alone. Grace approached the bed with gentle movements. "I'm Grace, your nurse tonight," she said. The man's eyes opened slowly, studying her. "Caspian Thornwell," he replied in a soft voice. His gaze felt heavy with hidden truths. Grace checked his vital signs with care. "Your family will visit soon, I hope?" Caspian smiled, but his eyes showed pain. "Family forgets you when you're no longer useful." Grace understood that loneliness too well. She'd seen wealth abandon the dying before. "I've watched powerful people die here alone," Grace said while adjusting his pillow carefully. "Money doesn't buy love at the end." Caspian watched her with unexpected intensity now. "You sound like someone who's lost faith." Grace paused, her hands trembling slightly then. "I promised myself I'd never marry again." Her voice cracked with old hurt inside. "Why care for us then?" Caspian asked. Grace sat beside his bed very slowly. "Because someone should remember you existed here." Tears filled her eyes unexpectedly then. "Because your last breath deserves a witness." Caspian reached for her hand with effort. His grip was surprisingly warm and strong. "What happened to you, Grace Ashmore?" he asked. She looked away toward the dark window. "Life taught me kindness gets punished, sir." Over the following weeks, something shifted quietly. Grace brought Caspian books he couldn't read. She described sunsets he couldn't see anymore. She told him stories of her childhood. He listened like every word was precious. "My father died when I was 12, Grace shared one rainy evening softly. "Medical bills destroyed everything we had saved." Caspian's expression darkened with something like guilt. "The hospital took our house eventually too." Her voice was steady, but her pain lingered. "Is that why you became a nurse?" Grace nodded, wiping away silent tears again. "I wanted to be different, somehow better." She laughed bitterly at her own words. "But this world doesn't reward different people." Caspian struggled to sit up more straight. "Grace, would you do something for me?" She leaned closer to hear him better. "Marry me before I die here alone." Grace's breath caught on her throat hard. "Mr. Thornwell, you don't mean that seriously." But his eyes held desperate sincerity now. "I've never been more serious, dear Grace." His voice strengthened with sudden conviction there. "I don't want to die unloved." After days of thought, Grace agreed finally. They married in his hospital room simply. The same priest witnessed their quiet vows. Grace wore her nurse's uniform, still working. Caspian wore his dignified suit again. "I promise to honor you," she whispered. Her hands trembled holding his frail ones. "And I promise you'll never struggle again," Caspian said back to her tenderly. Grace thought he meant heaven awaited. She kissed his forehead with tears streaming. Then something miraculous happened the next week. Caspian's health improved dramatically and suddenly. Color returned to his weathered face. Strength flowed back into his tired limbs. Grace watched, confused but hopeful for once. "I need to tell you something," Caspian said one morning, clearly. He sat up completely for the first time. "I own this hospital, Grace. I own 17 others across the country." Grace stepped back in shock and confusion. "I was never dying from terminal illness," Caspian continued speaking with deep regret showing. "I pretended to test everyone around me." His voice broke with shame and guilt. "My own children wanted me dead quickly." Grace's world tilted sideways hearing this truth. "You lied to me?" she whispered. Anger and hurt mixed in her chest. "I married you out of pure compassion." Caspian reached for her, but she moved away. Grace, please understand why I had to. You used my kindness as some test? Grace's voice rose sharply with betrayal feelings. You watched me cry for you daily. She turned toward the door to leave. I trusted you, Mr. Thornwell. I trusted you. Wait, Caspian called desperately now, standing. You showed me humanity still exists, Grace. He walked toward her on unsteady feet. In a world of vultures and liars, his hands caught her hands before she left. You gave me hope when I needed it. Grace stood frozen between hurt and understanding. What do you want from me now? Caspian pulled an envelope from his pocket. I want to build something together. He handed it to her with hope. A place where no one dies forgotten. Grace opened it with shaking fingers carefully. Architectural plans showed a beautiful care facility. The Ashmore House, the title read clearly. A community center for the abandoned elderly. You do this? Grace asked softly. Caspian nodded with tears in his eyes. Only if you'll run it beside me. His voice carried years of loneliness forward. I need someone who cares without agenda. Grace looked at the plans again closely. She thought of all the patients dying. She remembered her father's last lonely days. Why should I trust you again now? Caspian took both her hands in his. Because I finally found someone worth changing for. Months later, Ashmore House opened its doors. Grace walked through halls filled with laughter. Elderly residents painted together in bright studios. Nurses who actually cared smiled with them. Caspian stood beside her watching it all. You know what I realized? Grace asked. Caspian turned to her with questioning eyes. Kindness isn't weakness after all these years. She squeezed his hand with genuine affection. It's the only thing that saves us. Caspian pulled her close in warm embrace. You saved me, Grace. You really did. She rested her head on his shoulder. Maybe we saved each other instead, she whispered. They stood together watching sunset through windows. An elderly woman played piano in corner. Young volunteers served dinner with careful attention. This is what hope looks like, Grace said. No, Caspian corrected her, gently smiling now. This is what love looks like, darling. Grace smiled back at him with tears. When did you fall in love exactly? Caspian thought carefully before answering her question. The moment you said my last breath deserved a witness, he replied with deep emotion showing. Grace remembered that night in the rain. I meant every word I said then. I know you did, Caspian said softly. That's exactly why I fell in love. They kissed as the sun set golden. Around them, forgotten people found family again. Grace returned to the window like before, but this time she wasn't alone anymore. Rain still fell on the glass outside, but inside, warmth filled every empty corner. Thank you for not giving up, Caspian said. Grace turned to him with radiant smile. Thank you for giving me a reason. She touched the glass one last time. You know what the greatest gift is? She asked him with wisdom earned hard. Caspian waited for her answer, patiently listening. Grace looked around at all that they'd built. Believing someone deserves kindness, she said finally, even when the world says they don't. Caspian wrapped his arms around her tight. Especially when the world says they don't, he agreed wholeheartedly with her sentiment. And in that moment, two broken souls found their healing together at last.